Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Great to see you here. As you may know, there's some stiff competition taking place over at Hampshire this evening. But anyway, we have a great program, I think, lined up for you. We want to start on time. It's just about 7. But wouldn't you know, a computer can act up, and this time we're endeavoring to pull some sound from somewhere. So we have the folks trying to do that. But anyway, shall we go ahead? And my name's Crist, and as I say, it's great to see you all here. Really have been looking forward to being able to do a program about the Hawkeye Band, and I think you'll enjoy this evening. I'd like to introduce the stars of the show tonight. First of all, Dr. Eric Bush, Director of Bands at the University and Director of the Hawkeye Marching Band. And then also we have Christian Frankel, who is the drum major. He's in his 4th year with the university. Very pleased that he is back again this year and will again be the drum major for the group, and it's great. He does a marvelous job, and you've probably maybe seen him with what's called the mace, the long-looking baton. He twirls it and he throws it about 800 feet in the air, and does a great job with that. Again, it's a pleasure to introduce Ella McDaniel. Ella is the Golden Girl, and she's the featured twirler with the Hawkeye Band. She's now in her 2nd year, and in 2022, she was selected as Miss Majorette of America. So, and then Dulcie Lara Flores, a great friend. We all know Dulcie and appreciate everything that she does for us here. And also, it's a pleasure now to say that she has just assumed a position. She graduates in May and has assumed the position now as band intern. So she's going to have a number of responsibilities that are being defined and probably end up with something and other responsibilities as may be determined. So anyway, great to have a few of us. So I think we're going to go ahead and start. We'll have the folks sit there, and they'll be integrated into the presentation tonight. So again, a great pleasure, a real friend, and a wonderful band director. And it's my privilege to again introduce Dr. Eric Bush for tonight's program.
Well, good evening, everyone. We're going to get this PowerPoint happening one way or another here. So, again, I'm Eric Bush. I'm the 13th director of the Hawkeye Marching Band. My background is sort of long and varied, but to suffice to say that this is my dream job. This is the job that I've always wanted, and I'm fortunate enough to be one of those people that were able to get their dream job. So I'm originally from Michigan. Did my undergrad at Central Michigan University. I went to the University of Montana for my master's degree, and I had all set to go out and teach in the public schools, and I sort of got bitten by the collegiate conducting bug. I thought, well, maybe I could do this thing at higher ed and in college teaching. So I applied then for basically every job that I was half qualified for or less than half qualified for, and I was able to get just a couple bites. And I landed one job at Suffolk County Community College, which is a very large community college on Long Island in New York. And I was there for 4 years with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And we decided we wanted to go back to grad school. And we started looking around for places that we could go where they had great band programs and great dance programs and all had openings at the same time. So that was like 100 places, narrowed down to about 3 actually, that all worked out really well. And Iowa was #1 on our list, and we were both very fortunate to get graduate teaching assistantships here at the University of Iowa. So we were here from 2012 to 2015. I earned my doctorate, and my wife earned her master's degree in dance. And I was fortunate enough to get the position of assistant director of bands at Penn State University. So I went out to Happy Valley, State College, Pennsylvania, was there for 3 years, worked with the Marching Blue Band and their concert band program, also served as assistant director of jazz studies. I did a whole bunch of stuff out there and built my credentials, and lo and behold, the one job that I wanted became open. Kevin Castens announced his retirement back in 2018, and I applied for it, the only job I applied for that year, and I was really happy to earn the position. So we moved here in 2018, so I'm on my 5th year now as Hawkeye Marching Band Director and Associate Director of Bands at Iowa. But working with the Hawkeye Marching Band certainly is the biggest part of my job, and it's an absolute highlight for everything that I do. So tonight's presentation, we'll get the PowerPoint going in a few minutes, and we'll catch up to wherever we are. But I thought I'd spend a little bit of time going through the history of the band, just for those who might be interested. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that because that would be a 3-4 hour presentation in itself. Talk a little bit about who are the students in the Hawkeye Marching Bands. I think that's really interesting. Where do we come from? Where is the background of our students? What do they do? What are some of the roles of these fabulous individuals over here, who are 3 of our absolute best students in the HMB? And then talk a little bit about game days. What does it take to put on a show? How do we create a show? How do we plan for that? How do we get the show up and running? How do we do that 7 times a year in unique shows, right? Putting those all together, and then talk about a little bit about where the band's going, some of the exciting things that are happening, and we're actually on the eve of a really important campaign for One Day for Iowa tomorrow as well. So let me jump right into the history, and I think we're maybe switching out computers and getting the PowerPoint transferred back and forth, and we're going to use something. Like, we got greedy, right, because the video was working. We actually had it up on the screen, and then we were trying to get audio as well, so then the audio stopped, we unplugged. Should never unplug. So that's we've learned that the hard way, so it's all good. So the Hawkeye Marching Band is 142 years old, going on 143 years. It was founded back in 1881, on September 14th to be exact. There were orders from the military that came down for the University of Iowa back in what was called the Military Science Department. And the University of Iowa's, the original State University of Iowa's band was essentially a military band, right? As were all bands that were, sort of in the academic setting back in this time. There was really no difference between the band that was here and the bands that were in the military proper, in the Army, in the Air Force, Navy, etc. So our band literally came out of the military tradition. We were a functional band. We played for engagements for the president of the university. We were involved in parades. We were there for ceremonies. We were sort of a functional band. Every once in a while, we would play for mixers, as we would call it, or we would play for for dances and sort of things that way. But the band was sort of not considered much of an artistic unit, but more of a functional unit. So history starts to move a little bit, and in America, football starts being played in major universities across the country. So it started off into sort of intramural leagues, and then became more professional based, and there were conferences that began. And of course, Iowa and the Big Ten Conference was one of the oldest ones. So I like to joke that we were just a couple years older than Hawkeye football, so we are the elders in that situation. So we were around first, and then eventually football came around, and they wanted us to come play. So we came to perform for half times and to have some presence there as well. We were one of the first bands that made a block I on the field. So there's certain bands that claim to be of the very first. Michigan claims the block M, we claim the block I, Illinois claims the block I. There's a few others, but it all happened right around the turn of the century, and that continued all the way up until about 1906. It was run by students, right? So there were students that were part of the military science department, and those students would actually run the band, and they would sort of take their time as drum major and artistic director and all of that. But as the band became bigger and it started to be performing for more and more athletic events, there became a need for a professional director. So the School of Music affiliated, would have been the School of Performing Arts, but the Department of Music affiliated that was inside, they decided that it was going to be important to have a professional director. So they hired the very first professional director, Henry Cox. He was only here for a couple of years. He was a Nebraska native, and started to move the band in the right direction. And over time, the professional director got closer and closer and closer to the School of Music until eventually they were a full-fledged faculty member. And then probably the most famous of those early directors when the School of Music really took off was C.B. Ryder, Charles B. Ryder. And Ryder was really the one that pushed the marching band, or the football band as they called it at that time, and the concert band program really to new heights and put it on the map. So that was the very first, the very first thing. So you all know the tune On Iowa, so one of our 3 major fight songs, yeah. So he was the one that introduced On Iowa to the band. So before that there was Iowa Fights, and there were a few older tunes that people didn't really know very well, but they wanted a better fight song. And a gentleman by the name of W.R. Law came around, and there was a competition to see who could write the best fight song, new fight song for the University of Iowa. And this tune called On Iowa was submitted, and it lost miserably. It was not chosen, nobody liked it, but it wasn't really played for anyone either. So he was an ambitious fellow, Law was, and he actually followed C.B. Ryder around to community band performances in the area. And he finally got to them one night and said, "You've got to play my tune, you've got to play On Iowa." And the tune was passed out, and the boys in the band read it that night, and they really liked it. So they kept playing it for the rest of the summer, and then when school started to get in campus, they started to play it that way, and it sort of very quickly grew into a tune that everybody wanted. So even though it didn't win the competition, it did become one of our major fight songs, and that continued all the way into the 50s before the Iowa fight song was part of that as well, before Roll Along was created as well. So those were the early days of the band. When we get into Owie Van Doren and all of that, and into Fred Ebbs, that's when things start to change a little bit, right? So Van Doren, we really consider that the military tradition. C.B. Ryder is the one that really took us to the end of the military tradition and started to shift things a little bit. But when Fred Ebbs came around, that was sort of the first director that took the band really from its military roots into what he called a show band situation. So Edashevsky, right, you know that name from the road, and of course the famous coach at Iowa came along, and he sort of laid into the band and said, "We have got to have a band that does more showy things. You can't just make a damn block and go up and down the field all the time. We want there to be more pictures, more things going on." So Fred Ebbs was the one who was responsible for that. And only he was here for a little less than 10 years. But if you look at those old uniforms of the HMB, the old style military ones, Ebbs is the one that brought us out of that. So if you look at the band as they looked in the 57 Rose Bowl, the early first Rose Bowl, and then the 59 Rose Bowl where they changed the uniform, then you can see how the band really started to evolve and become more of what we think of as the Hawkeye Marching, and that's when the name came along as well. So Ebbs was here in the early 1950s and really progressed the band. That's when the name Hawkeye Marching Band wasn't just a State University of Iowa band any longer. It really became part of the vernacular. And then into that time period, we see a lot of change in the band, right? So we ended up in World War II times. For the first time in the band's history, there were women in the band during World War II, so many of the men were off fighting overseas, and there was a need to keep bands moving in the States. So a lot of women took over and were able to, hey, I think I see something happening. This is good, we're like halfway there, okay. So women joined the band for the first time, and that lasted for just a few years. So when the war ended, they allowed all the women in the marching band to stay in up until they graduated. So for a few years, essentially they died out into the early 1950s, and it would stay that way all the way until 1972 when the Title IX legislation took over. So a really, really big deal. So when we talk about the first women in the band, it really goes back to the 40s, and then before we got everything in, back into the 70s. So Frank Pearsall took over after Fred Ebbs. He was only the director of the marching band officially for 1 year, even though he was the director of bands. That is where the positions split. So my colleague, Dr. Mark Heidel, the director of bands at the University of Iowa, we have a shared lineage all the way up until Frank Pearsall. So when Frank Pearsall took over, Frank became the director of bands, and of course the legendary assistant Tom Davis became the associate director of bands and the director of the Hawkeye Marching Band. So of course Dr. Tom has probably you've had some people here that knew the new Tom, yep, his wife Pat, yep. So of course legendary folks at the University of Iowa. Tom was involved in not just the Hawkeye Marching Band, but the jazz studies area and the percussion studio, and he really put percussion on the map at Iowa as well. So he became the director as well, and he was a longtime member of the faculty, but only actually was the director of the HMB for a couple of years before he switched his services over basically to full-time percussion, and he actually began running the alumni band 50 years ago this year. So 1973 was when the alumni band started. So during that year, there was another shift in directors. So the great Morgan Jones became the director of the Hawkeye Marching Band back in 1973. And Dr. Jones holds one of the longest histories of any director in the HMB, and that really was the band's golden years, right? So going from 1973 all the way up until 1990, legendary shows, the Music Man shows, all of the the shows that were part of that era are looked on really fondly. Remember the 1812 show, right, when they did that for the Rose Bowl as well? So really, really, really big deal. And he capped off his career by winning the Sudler Trophy. So those of you who don't know, the Sudler Trophy is a trophy that can only be won one time by a collegiate marching band. This started back in the early 1980s, and we were actually the 9th band ever to win the trophy. It is the highest rank that a college marching band can win by this organization. It's done by the NBA and the Sousa Foundation. We were the 9th band to win it. And then fast forward for about 20 years, they gave it out every year, and then they began giving it out every other year as they wanted to slow it down a little bit. So to date, there are only, I think, 32 or 33 bands in the nation. We happen to be one of them, so that's a really big deal for us. For somehow we didn't buy the trophy back in that day. There was a traveling trophy that you got to keep for a year, and we did that, but after the trophy left, we were left with this itty-bitty plaque that was about 6 inches tall, and it still lives over in the practice facility. But when I first got here, I said, well, where's the Sudler Trophy? Usually, it's about, 2 feet high and, weighs about 100 pounds. We didn't have one, so the alums, one of the first things that they did for the organization when I got to be director was raise the funds to buy the Sudler Trophy, which we're really proud to own now. And it sits in Kathy Ford's office, the band office at the University of Iowa, and we're really, really proud of that. So that was back in 1990. So Morgan Jones retired and went on to his golden years. At least he thought for a couple of years. He was going to be back for a couple of years later, though. So he was here till 1990, and then the band went through a number of directors in the 90s. So at first there was a man named Dave Henning, who came in for 3 years, didn't have a very long tenure with the band, and he went down to Texas afterwards. Or I should say he was the next permanent director. Dave Woodley, who of course that's a name a lot of people know as well, the longtime director of the Marching 100 at Indiana, spent 2 years as interim director. Most people thought that he was going to get the job long term. That didn't happen, so Dave Henning came on. He was there for about 3 years, and things weren't going particularly well with that particular tenure. So Morgan Jones 2.0, he came back for 2 years in 1996 and 1997 to sort of steady the waters again before Kevin Castens was hired in 1998. So my predecessor, Kevin Castens, was here for 20 years. That's the longest serving tenure director of the Hawkeye Marching Band. So if you like the Tiger Hawk, for example, into the band, hey, I'm seeing things now. We're almost going to have a visual for all these. Let's see how good I am if I remembered all this stuff or not. I could be making all this up, But Kevin was the director of the Hawkeye Marching Band for 20 years. The Tiger Hawk that you see and love that's in pregame is his innovation. When we talk about flipping the hawk, so during the fight song we make the upside down hawks and flip it to the right side up hawks to the west sideline. That was one of the inventions that he did. He's also the one that changed pregame to make it a part 1 and part 2 when Coach Ferentz came on and wanted the players to be out for the national anthem. We moved the national anthem out of the middle of pregame, moved it to the end of pregame, so now when you see that block down at the end of our pregame show and we do the Herky entrance and the national anthem and all that good stuff, the Trooping the Colors, all of that happens in part 2, and that was Kevin Castens as well. So you might remember some shows like Thriller for him and the Dance Revolution show, and some that were really popular as well. So again, he's one of the directors that sort of changed that style again. So drum corps became popular back in the 70s and 80s, so doing abstract drill and some of that. So he was sort of a pivotal figure as well. So then fast forward a little bit towards the end of his tenure, we start seeing sort of a renaissance of animation and picture drill coming back. So y'all remember the Ohio State movie, or the Ohio State video game show that had the cool horse that ran down the field and Zelda and all of that. Most people thought that was the first time that any of that had happened, but if you were to call any of the band directors back in like the 50s and the 60s, like Fred Epps, he said, no, we were doing that for 20 years back in those times. So it was sort of a renaissance. Of course, YouTube didn't exist back then, so it was not widely known what a lot of this drill looked like, but if you go back and look at the charts, you can see that's where a lot of that came from. So there's a big renaissance, and a lot of bands have started to do those things again now. We see a lot of collaborations with audio, video, and Hawk Vision, and sort of all the bells and whistles that go along with a major collegiate football stadium, and that's where sort of marching band is today. So it's not just going out and playing music and marching, which has to be really great, but it's also using the tools that we have beyond that. So having videos involved in the band, using props, lights. If you watched the Michigan show last year, you saw the lights went out and they actually did glow like on their plumes. If you all see it, it's really cool. Their lights are more upgraded than ours. That's why they can do that, turn the lights off. If we turn the lights off in Canada, it takes like 30 minutes to turn them back on. So we can't do that yet until they replace the lights in there, but we will someday. But again, that's where marching band is really heading into a brand new era. It's an exciting time for that. So let's see if we've almost got it working now. So we might be able to go picture by picture, maybe. See how much of this I got right. This is always a test. When the PowerPoint doesn't work, can Bush remember the dates? And these are all important things. Yeah, I can look. That's fine. Yeah, no, that's totally fine. We'll work with the arrows. Hey, that doesn't work great. Okay. So I'm going to take you very quickly through basically these first 10 or 12 slides. Thank you very much. Let's do it in a hand. Can we get the lights off as well so we see just at the top? Yeah. Be a little bit easier to see. So we'll go quickly through these since I'm giving you most of the information as it is. So here again, 1981 through 1910. So here are some of the earliest pictures of the Hawkeye Marching Band, back then called the SUI Battalion Band. This is the oldest known picture of the original 13-member band that we have. So that's the oldest photo that we're aware of. That's from about 1885, 1886, somewhere in there. So about 4 or 5 years into the band's tenure. Anybody recognize the top right picture? Where is that? That building still exists. Anybody know? It's about to be torn down, but it's a good guess. I think you might have heard it. It's called the Women's Gym, which is now known as Halsey Hall. Yeah, Halsey Hall, yep. So fast forward 1911 through 1953, we see Owie Van Dorn as the director. So you can see some of those old fight songs. So you recognize the IOWA drill at the bottom. So that still exists. We still make IOWA. It's our first formation after the boom, after our run-on and downfield sequence. We still make IOWA, so that's a historic thing for us. C.B. Ryder, again, responsible for the new uniforms, assistant directors for the first time, right? And he was also the one that instituted the new fight song, Meredith Wilson's The Iowa Fight Song, which came to be back in the early 1950s, and of course that's been a hit ever since. If you've all watched the PBS documentary, we talk about that. There's a DVD extra that we're part of, or a special feature as well. So 1954 through 1966, there's Ebbs, and you can see him working on the big IOWA. Again, that's historic to our pregame, so you can see how that translates. Again, we talked about the new show band uniform, so that's an Ebbs creation. So if you ever look at the second Rose Bowl, that's the uniform that you'll see in that. 1967 through 1972, Frank Pearsall, just for 1 year, even though he was here for about 10 years as the director of bands. There's the legendary Tom Davis, who was director of the alumni band as well. The original Marching Herky drawing, which if you all ask me really nice at the end of this, we might show you some of the renderings. We're redrawing Marching Herky right now, and we're actually using this for a retro version of Marching Herky as well, which is pretty cool. Yes, sir? You made anything you want, Lou. In Lou, we trust.
Can you go back to the shot of Fred Ebbs with the field in front of it? Just a quick story. I invited Kevin Castens to come to the Rotary Club that meets on Thursdays here in Iowa City to talk about how things are put together and shows and so on. And when I was in school here, I was in television was part of what I was studying, and we were assigned to do a program. And I invited Tom Davis to come and demonstrate with a layout of the field and how he would use pieces of cardboard for parts of the band and show how, and this was a drill at this time, and how that was going to take place on the field. And then we showed, I had a black and white film of the band, and then we showed how that transformed to what happened on the field. I invited Kevin to come to the Rotary Club, and just as we've had some issues here with computer, he was having trouble with what he was trying to demonstrate, and it wasn't coming up. And what he wanted to do was show how he actually put together a show with computer help now. And so it wasn't happening for quite a while. And I heard a gentleman, I don't know who it was behind me, he said quietly, well, better get the cardboard out again. That's the story.
And that's what he's talking about right there. That's how drill used to be. There were never technical glitches. I guess if the breeze picked up that thing, but yeah. So that's how drill used to be done back in those times. I still have a set of those in my office. They were basically, you seen like war pongs, right? You'd have the big stick and you could advance the people and all that. That's how they did that. It was very cool. We tested fade here. Let's see if we can keep it moving. That's okay. We've got the circle of death. Let's see if we can. Oh, we're good. We're back. Okay. There it is. Good. So fast forward to Morgan Jones' time. So there's a great shot of Morgan down there with the band in his earlier years. You can see the trend of the uniforms. Followed a lot of Drum Corps International, DCI, back in those times. So the capes were a big deal. Those were really cool. You could get different looks of all that. The Sudler Trophy is over there. One little story about the Sudler Trophy. When we got it remade just a couple years ago, the question came from the jeweler who made it and said, well, what do you want it to look like? Do you want it to look like it looks in 2018? Or do you want it to look like it looked in 1990 when you originally wanted it? So, well, what would be the difference? I said, well, the number of bands that are listed on it. So I started to think, okay, well, we want all those bands on it, or do you just want the 8 that wanted before us? And I went to our alumni board who was raising the money and all that. And they said, well, which bands would be on it? I kind of went through the list, and the Sudler Trophy, you can see it's a circle, and the band that wins right away is in the front, and then all the other bands go all the way around. And in 2018, the most recent band that would have won that trophy was the Cyclone Band from that other place out in Ames, and their name would have been right next to ours, and I couldn't have that. So we decided that was the reasoning behind it. We did not want it to look like it looked in 2018. So if you see our Southern Trophy, it looks exactly like it looked in 1990, with just 8 bands, and we're the 9th. So no other bands from Iowa. So 91 through 97, again, Dave Woodley here for 2 years. Remember the great pinball wizard arrangement that he did. Known for a number of things, became the longtime director of the Marching 100 at Indiana. Dave Henning for 1993 through 95. A couple short things that he did, but also a couple long-lasting things. So when you hear the band end its rehearsals, How Your Heels together, the thing that Christian does, that's a Henning tradition as well. So we see that come in, and of course Morgan came back just for a couple of years, 1996 through 1997, to stabilize the program before Kevin Castens was hired in 1998. So again, flipping up the Hawks, the Tiger Hawk, dividing the pregame. He was also the first director that annually went to a bowl game. So prior to his tenure, there was basically the Rose Bowl and a couple others, and that was basically it. You only went there if you won the conference. Now we have about 1,000 bowls every year. You can go to any bowl you want to. It can be named after anything. It can be anywhere you want, warm weather, cold weather, middle of the ocean, anywhere. But Kevin was the first person that actually had a band that basically went to a bowl game every year, and that was a big change for marching bands during his time. So then we get to the Bush era. Not a whole lot to say yet. We'll find out in about 30 years how good I do. But in terms of the band, I think things are going well. We've enhanced halftime shows with audio, video, and props. A lot of emphasis on collaboration. So you can look at that this year. Our campus partners, we did a CAN-BUS show, the big Ohio State show that we did this year, the Elton John show was a big deal for us. The formation of our alumni leadership board has been a big deal. So, when I got here, our alums were incredibly dedicated, but also incredibly disorganized. And that's not a disservice to them. They just didn't have a centralized unit where they could sort of come together and plan big things that they could do that facilitated their work with the current band and also as their own entity. So the alumni board, led by our Lean Hauk and Kirk Phillips and those folks, have been absolutely fabulous. and they've just done a ton of stuff. Significant increase in fundraising. We've done a lot of work on that. I'll tell you more about that later, but we went from about $30,000 a year through almost $170,000 a year now in sort of small dollar donations, including some really big multi-year six-figure gifts that have come to pass as well. And I'm really excited. We are in the middle of our very first assistant director hire since the early 90s, or actually the late 80s really was the last time there was an official assistant director of the Hawkeye Marching Band. So we are really blessed. The College of Liberal Arts and Sciences has allowed us to do that search, and we will have, bless you, and we will have a assistant director for the first time in almost 30 years when we take the field next year in the fall, which is a really exciting thing for us. All right, so behind the scenes, what does it take to be in the Hawkeye Marching Band? So just so you know, first year students audition during their orientation sessions in June and July. Over 150 students vie for usually 70 to 90 positions. We have 3 drumline clinics in June, and then they also audition for the drumline in mid-July. And students are all notified in mid-July whether they've made the band, so it's a big deal. Once we release that roster in July, we've got essentially 30 days until band camp, and a lot of things start to happen, very, very, very quickly. So, who's in the band? So we've numbered the band. So we were in band 142 and founded in 1881. Next year will be band 143. Our wonderful drum major, our wonderful Golden Girl, 265 marching Hawkeyes. Roughly 51% of our students identify as female or non-binary. 16% are underrepresented minority students. That's the most in the band's history. That's something that we're really proud of, and we're even moving that needle faster than the University of Iowa, which is really exciting as well. So more than 90 new members in the band each year, so it's a big undertaking in camp to get those students ready, basically in about a week and a half for their first game. 1 director, soon to be 2, 1 operations manager in Kathy Ford, 5 graduate teaching assistants, 35 undergraduate teaching staff, recruitment team, and a media team. And that's what everything that you see with the Hawkeye Marching Band is done with that relatively small group of people, which is pretty impressive. We have a smart band, 3.35 cumulative GPA. Again, for 265 people anywhere on campus, that's a very impressive GPA to have as well. Of course, we have 3 people over here that are keeping that average up very high. 31 students with GPAs that are 4.0 or higher in the band. We had 121 students on either the president's list or the dean's list this year, so that's absolutely incredible. The amount of time that it takes to be in the Hawkeye Marching Band is a formidable thing, and for those students to be able to do so well on the field and off the field academically is a really, 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 really big deal. So what does Hell Week look like, or band camp as we call it, right? So Hell Week, the first week of band camp in the HTRC, the Hawkeye Tennis and Recreation Complex. First year students in leadership report 10 days before the start of classes. We get our vets in 1 week from the start of the semester. Christian Frankel, our drum major, it's his show for the first few days, responsible for teaching all of our fundamentals, high step and low step, which I know he's going to talk about in a couple minutes here. Our student leadership reinforces and teaches music, marching, fundamentals, and drill. And our focus is pregame first, getting our pregame sequence on the field, and usually we get a portion of our first halftime on the field as well. So show planning begins now. We're actually going to be starting the show planning process in just a week or two, talking about the shows that we want with OTAs and our staff, and start to talk about arrangements and themes and anniversaries that are coming up. And these ideas are sourced both from ourselves, something that we want to do, but the students have a major part in this as well. There are form that they fill out. They can put all kinds of ideas. We combine things and put things together and take the absolute best ideas that we have and arrange them. So arrangers are assigned. Music is usually due to me in June. Drill writers are assigned, with drill charts due 1 month prior to the performance, so everything comes together basically by the end of July, early August for the first few shows, and then the drill comes in a little bit later for sort of our second half of the year for our shows in October and early November. So I'm going to introduce Christian Frankel, drum major of the Hawkeye Marching Band. First of all, a wonderful human being, one of the best drum majors that's ever worn the uniform, just an incredible person. He has been a force for teaching the band's fundamentals. He is an incredible mace technician. His work that he's done with mace spinning, he can tell you a little bit more about his upbringing and all that, but even when he applied to be drum major, had to learn a different style of spinning mace, different from when he was drum major in high school, and relearned it faster than anyone that I've ever seen. And just a great mentor, a great leader. Everyone in the Hawkeye Marching Band looks up to him, and it's not because of just because of the work he does on the field, but it's who he is as a person as well. So I've invited him tonight to just maybe talk about the show preparation process. How do we learn drill in the HMB? What does learning a show look like from a student perspective? How do we get things on the field quickly? How can we go from essentially learning, the first note of a show and the first set of a show on a Tuesday and putting it on the field on a Saturday? And I think it's a pretty impressive thing to do, and I think he's got a good vantage point to talk about that. So let him introduce himself and talk a little bit about his position and a little bit about what our process is like. So, Christian Franklin.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you so much for being here tonight. As Dr. Bush said, my name is Christian Frankel, and I have the honor of being the drum major of the Hawkeye Marching Band. I was the drum major last season, and I will also be the drum major next season. And I will be a fifth year next year, studying political science, ethics, and public policy, and music. So I've just had a fantastic time being the drum major, and I love being a part of this band. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my position. So as the drum major, I am the top student leader within the band. So we have a leadership team of 35 students, and I am the top person in that hierarchical pyramid. And I also have the responsibility, as Dr. Bush said, of teaching the band marching fundamentals during the band camp season. So when you see the band during pregame, we're doing our traditional high step where we have our horns swaggering, just as Lou did back in the day in the late 1950s when he was in the band. So some things never change. And then I also teach our low step fundamentals as well. And then as Dr. Bush said, I also spin the mace, which is the really long sort of baton looking thing. And I throw it really high up in the air and I do cool tricks with that. And I wear my really big hat and I do my back bend. So I just had a really good time being the drum major, and it's been fantastic leading the band. So, with preparing a show, there's a lot that goes into a show. So we learn the drill, and usually it starts about 2 weeks before the game, and we have the drill actually on our phones, which is something that's fairly new for marching band. So we have an app called Flip Folder, and then we have all of our drill and all of our music on our phones. We start looking in that, and then the first couple days, we will start seeing where we're at on the field, making drill, and we'll just keep doing that with reps, and then on Tuesday night, we'll go over it with music. And then as the week goes on, we start learning the drill, and then we perfect it for Saturdays and our game days. So, yeah. Anything else you'd like me to talk about?
So when we're in that process, Christian, how do we get from learning the drill itself, our movements, to the music, and how are we putting that together? How does that process work?
Yeah, so we first do things separately. So we first just start with the drill, so we do it with counts. So we might have like a 20 count move where we go into one picture, so we'll rep that a couple times, see where we go, and then we look at the next drill, and then we'll make another picture, and we'll do that without music. And then we'll rehearse just music on Tuesday night, and then we'll add the music into the drill, and we'll start, again, chunking it really slow at first, just doing individual pictures, and then we put it all together as the week goes on, and then you start to see moving people, and we start spelling things out to what you see on the field.
Christian, and you'll be around for some questions here in a few minutes, too.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Great people, We love Christian, and we're never going to let him leave, and someday he does. We're all going to vote for him in whatever office that he wants to hold. And if you have my vote, I'll campaign for you, Christian, I will. So, next wonderful human that's sitting over there is our golden girl, Ella McDaniel. Ella is literally the best twirler in the country, and I say that, and there's no bias in my mind, of course, but I think most of the country would agree with that. She's been honored in so many ways in her career as a twirler. She's been Miss Majorette of America in different levels, finally sort of achieving the highest Miss Majorette of America, the Teenage Miss Major of America, or was originally called just Miss Major of America, this past year, which puts her really in an elite class. We've been fortunate enough in the HMB to have a number of featured twirlers who have held that title over the years, but it's nearly an Olympic sport. It should be probably, but the kind of work that goes into that, folks that are of Ella's calibers, start twirling when they are, itty bitty, when they're 4 or 5 years old. There are all kinds of different things that they will do to prepare, different circuits they're in, and the amount of work that happens, all the way through her upbringing. But what makes Ella wonderful isn't really the twirling. She's a fabulous twirler. We're fortunate to have her, and she's ours and nobody else's, but she's also just as good of a person. And when you get a golden girl, someone that comes in, that they do the one thing that's different than everybody else, it would be super easy for her to sort of be a loner and sort of be off on her own and really not interact a whole lot with the band. And there have been, you know, in our history, maybe folks that fit more of that bill. But Ella's not that. She is one of our fearless leaders. I mean, she is rolling up her sleeves. She is carrying ladders. If Christian is ever out of rehearsal, she's stepping in to do things in that way as well. I mean, she works as hard or harder to make the band successful than anybody else that's on the field. And that's something that really makes her special. So we were super lucky to get her in this position, and we're lucky that we've got her for at least a few more years as well. So I've asked Ella to come in, just talk a little bit about being the Hawkeye Golden Girl, what that means, what that tradition means, and maybe just talk a little bit about game days. You know, there's a few things on the board here, but what does a game day look like? What are some of your favorite traditions, and you know, how does the Hawkeye Marching Band, you know, get from a 6 a.m., 5 a.m. call for rehearsal, you know, and into the game and into our march in and all of that? What are your favorite things to do? Ella McDaniel.
Hi everyone. Like Christian said, thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here. So being a Golden Girl is something that I've dreamed of since I was literally 5 years old. When you start baton twirling, the highest kind of level is like the collegiate twirlers. So I'm originally from New Hampshire, and the biggest collegiate twirler around my area is the Yukon featured twirlers. So I would go to games and I saw all of them. And then my first time I went to nationals, I was 7 years old, and at the time the Golden Girl was Chelsea Russell. And I saw her compete, and she was an amazing twirler on and off the field, on the competition floor and off. She's just genuinely a really, really nice person. I still keep in touch with her. So that is really where I first saw like the Golden Girl, where I really got interested in it. And every time when I would go to nationals and all these big competitions, I would always see the Golden Girl, and that's what really sparked my interest. So getting to this position wasn't really easy. I started twirling when I was 5, like I said, but that was just really recreationally, and I was kind of a beginner at that level. And then when I was 10 years old, I went to nationals for the first time in the advanced division, and I got 22nd, and I was like, I kind of want to do better than this. So then I ended up switching coaches, and my coach was actually a feature twirler at Penn State University, which, if you remember, is where Dr. Bush did his grad school. So I actually met Dr. Bush when I was 11. A little fun fact. So now I'm a new coach at the time, and then I went back to nationals, and 2 years later I won my first Miss Major of America title when I was in the preteen division, so that's the 10 to 12-year-old division. And then 3 years later I won the junior division, which is 13 to 15 years old, and then COVID happened, and then the first nationals back I won the current title I have, which is just Miss Major of America, which is really exciting. And then, in between those 2 titles was the auditions for Golden Girl, and that consisted of submitting a video just online with a YouTube link, and then there's a board, and they invited the top 3 to Iowa to audition, and then when...
Over 50 applicants, but I don't know if she knows that or not. There were 50 applicants.
I did not know that. So we went and we had a 30-minute interview just with Dr. Bush, and I didn't really know him, and it was kind of terrifying. And then also a 30-minute interview with an 11-person panel. That was also pretty terrifying. Lou was there though, I remember him. And nicest face in the room. And then we had to do our routine that we prepared beforehand, which was a 5 to 10 minute routine for that same panel, which was actually the easiest part of the whole thing, because I got pretty scared to talk. But, so yeah, and then we waited till that next Monday to hear back, and I was pretty terrified. And then the rest is history. So now to talk about game days. So our game days start really, really early. We had a lot of 11 a.m. games this year, and that we had to wake up, I think I woke up at 2:30 or 3 to get ready in the morning. And then, so for me and Christian, we get picked up by our work crew in our band van. So the work crew helps set up everything for practices and games, and they're just overall amazing. They help us out so much. So we get picked up by the band van, and we usually go get breakfast, a quick breakfast beforehand, and then we have to be in the rec building, which is kind of where it's like our headquarters for the game. And from that, we have a 2-hour rehearsal in Kinnick Stadium, which is before everyone even gets there to tailgate sometimes. And it's really empty, but it's also really pretty because we get to see the sunrise sometimes, especially with the early ones. So we have that rehearsal, and then we go back to the rec building and have a lunch or breakfast, and then get ready. And then before the game even starts, we have a rec building performance, which is where we do all of our pregame shows, or pregame songs, and then also all of our halftime songs. And the dance team comes and joins us, and Herky comes too sometimes, and it's really, really fun. Oh, and before that is the drumline lot show. So our drumline goes outside of Kinnick Stadium, and they do all of their kind of drills and everything, and they show some stuff too, which is really fun. And then after the rec building show, which has gotten a pretty big crowd this year, it's grown for sure. We all march to the stadium and we get ready for pregame. And yeah, that's all the behind the scenes.
What's your favorite tradition?
Oh, I totally forgot. Before pregame, this is my favorite. We all sing the alma mater in this tunnel all together. It's really nice. And then we all, of course, sing it after the game as well. But before the game is really, really special because it's just the band.
Oh, Daniel. And last but not least, our local celebrity, who I think everybody in this room knows in some way, shape, or form, Dulce Flores, an undergraduate staff member of the trumpet section of the Hawkeye Marching Band. Just a longtime member of the band, has been a wonderful member, a wonderful leader, a wonderful mentor. She's also serving as our intern right now, so she's helping out in the band office, helping out Kathy Ford, helping out me, really putting a lot together for all the things that we do. And we'd be lost without her in a lot of ways, so I thought maybe it'd be fun for her to talk about, what does it mean to lead a section? So talking about the trumpet section, the largest section of the band, what are some of the things that it takes to get, all 60 of those folks, sort of rowing in the same direction, and just talk to us a little bit about your role as an undergrad staff member. So, Dulce.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see everyone again. I know I've been traveling a lot with the bands, actually, and so it's good to be back and see all your familiar faces. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Dulce, and I actually work here as a bartender and server. And I also, as Dr. Bush says, I served 2 years in the undergraduate staff for the trumpet section for the Hawkeye Marching Band. And I am currently serving as the Hawkeye Marching Band intern for communications, and so I work closely with Kathy Ford as well as Dr. Bush and Dr. Heidel at the University Band Office. And many of you don't know this, but I almost didn't come to the Hawkeye Marching Band, and I'm glad it was the best decision I've ever made, because originally I had toured the school and fell in love with it back when I was living in Illinois, and when I returned home and told my parents I'm going to the University of Iowa, my dad also told me we were moving to Texas. And so it was a very difficult decision, but between a school in Texas, I absolutely fell in love with the university, and I couldn't say no to doing marching band. So I decided to commit to the University of Iowa and to audition, and I was very happy that they have accepted me, and I have spent the last 4 years as part of this wonderful organization. So with leading a section, I have spent, again, the last 2 years as undergraduate staff, and so the trumpet section is one of the largest sections of the band. I don't know if it's the largest, or it is the largest. We typically have about 60 or so members. I think this year we were about 56, and so it's quite a big section, and then we need a lot of leaders to handle that many people. And so there were 9 people on the leadership team for the trumpet section this year, and I believe there was 2 section leaders, and then the rest of us, there were 7 of us as undergraduate staff. And as part of it, we work in collaboration with the drum major, and so he will be leading a lot of the marching techniques and the different marching styles, but then we also work closely to kind of make sure that he can't have eyes on everyone, and so we're over there to make sure that we're picking up the little things that maybe they might have missed from his instruction, and being like, for example, our high-step marching technique has a lot of little details that we have to make sure are there, and sometimes it can be hard to catch that, especially with 200 people, so we're able to be there and be a helping hand and maybe reteach something if they didn't get it the first time, as well as being able to just make sure that we can work in a smaller section. And so the section leaders tends to run, when we have our own little sectionals, they will run the individual rehearsal, and the undergraduate staff will serve as kind of teaching assistants in the form that they will help assist in any way, shape, or form the section leaders' teaching methods, however they choose to teach that. And so we have had a really wonderful teaching staff. It has been a huge honor. I've been able to be a part of a trumpet section that has worked really closely together, and we have been able to have a really great trumpet section. And I think one of the things that we do is on game days we do a trumpet huddle, and I think that's always one of the highlights is being able to collaborate, because even with 56 people we're able to be a really close section. So I think that's been a great part about being able to lead a section. So yeah.
And that section, of course, has a warm place in my heart. When I was the TA at Iowa, I was in charge of the trumpet section. It's fun to see those traditions continue for all the time that I was there as a TA, and of course now from director. So these three wonderful individuals were also involved in some heavy collaborations this year. So big year in the HMB, 50th anniversary of Cam Bus. We did a big show featuring some cool tunes and a nearly life-size bus prop that was in the show as well. Still exists in a box somewhere in our storage room. Probably everyone saw the tribute to Elton John in the shoe in Columbus, Ohio. One of I think the best collaboration in college marching band was that show. There have been other collaborations where marching bands have gotten together, maybe one band's on one side of the field and the other band's on the other, maybe they meet in the middle a little bit. But the Ohio State-Iowa collaboration really had the bands fully integrated, and that show was done in about 2.5 weeks with both bands rehearsing separately and putting it together in literally 2 hours in Columbus, about 6 o'clock in the morning on a game day. It was a pretty incredible experience to put that together, and even got some shout outs from Elton John himself. We follow on social media. Elton John actually saw the show, and that was a pretty big moment for all of us involved. And also the Music Man show, the 120th anniversary of Meredith Willson's birth. So he's Music Man. Meredith Willson is a major figure in our history. Meredith Willson has conducted the band many times. There's a very cool video of him doing the Music Man show, and the very own Lou Crist is in that band and was able to play under the direction of Meredith Willson, and got to see him a number of times. And just there's been a huge collaboration. There's a story, age-old story about Wilson getting on the ladder and shouting at Kinnick Stadium, "Send this band to Pasadena." There wasn't enough money to send the band, and lo and behold, Oldsmobile stepped up the next day and funded the band, put them on a train, and they made it to the Rose Bowl. And that's thanks to Meredith Willson. So just a very, very cool show. Usually each director of the HMB does 1 or 2 Music Man shows in their career, so I guess I've got my first one in, so hopefully I'll be able to be here another 20 or 30 years to get the next one. But it was, again, just an incredible show. We actually had 76 actual trombones on the field, so our 38 regular trombones, and we invited 38 others from the band, a combination of students and staff. Some came out of the trumpet section, some came out of the sousaphone section, a couple clarinets learned how to play trombone, actually got them on P-bones, plastic trombones, and actually had them play the tune. So we had 76 actual trombones. The next time we do it, we're going to have 110 cornets as well. So that's the goal. So I want to get Lou up here for a minute. I'm going to skip that part. We can come back for a minute. But Lou Crist, the voice of the Hawkeye Marching Band, the golden voice of the Hawkeye Marching Band, has been in that role for over 41, going on 42 years. 1981 was his first year. Not the first announcer in the band. Fred Epps had the first announcer in the band back in the 50s. But Lou, by a million, has been our longest tenured announcer. He has been through, 7 directors of the Hawkeye Marching Band. He's done this for 41 years. I will turn 40 next year, so he has literally been doing this for longer than I've been alive. That is true. But he has seen a major history in the band. He is a major part of the history of the band. And this year, we are fortunate enough to not only be privileged by that service, but he and his wonderful wife Jan, who have just been some of my greatest friends since I've been in Iowa, have decided to start the Lou Crist Legacy Fund. And it's a gift to the Hawkeye Marching Band, a 6-figure gift, by the way, that will perpetuate the history of this band for generations to come. There are things that Lou has noticed over time, and I'll let him tell you more about this, where he's wanted to be able to do something for the band that will leave a lasting mark. And if being the announcer wasn't enough, this gift will certainly cement him as one of our greatest Hawkeyes, if he wasn't already, and he is. But we are fortunate to have this gift and fortunate to be able to share this gift with the world and talk about it. But tomorrow, for One Day for Iowa, the university's Day of Giving, we are going to share his gift with the world and hope that everybody joins in and gives to this fund, because this is a fund that's going to outlast all of us in the HMB. This is going to be something that is for Band 142 and Band 143, and will also be for Band 200 someday. Right? So these are the things that perpetuate a history and perpetuate a legacy and a future for our organization. And we were fortunate to have people like Lou and Jan who stand up and say that this is worth fighting for and this is worth getting. So I want him to talk a little bit about this fund and some of his history as the Golden Voice. And then in classic Bush fashion, there's a QR code if you want to give. That can happen in a few minutes too. But really, it's just a very, very cool thing to have him in our presence. And I've just enjoyed getting to know him over the years and thank him for everything that he's done. So, the Lou Crist.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. And I would say one thing about Eric is that he is generous with providing compliments and helping people do things and accomplish things and then make sure that they're thanked. And Eric is certainly one of them, a tremendous leader. And I want to introduce probably most of you know her, but Jan, my wife, would you stand up for just a minute? Who has been just a tremendous help to me over the years. But Jan and I had for some time tried to think about what we might be able to do in providing some support to the university. And it turns out that both Jan and I and our two sons and their wives have all gone to the University of Iowa. And so there certainly is a tie there. But the privilege of being the announcer for the band for all these years, it's just been a joy. And I have just a lot of memories and stories that occurred to me. And somebody said, well, you should write a book. But I'm afraid I have not kept details like what might be necessary to do that. But anyway, we have decided that we would like to provide some help to the University of Iowa Marching Band. And I need to say also that my brother Lyndon died last year, and it's possible through some of his assets and the sale of his home that we have some money that we've been able to do this. And so I want to be sure to thank Lyndon, who also was a part of the marching band back in the 60s. And so we have ties certainly with the band. And I know that my parents were just as proud as could be that I was accepted into the marching band here. And just a quick story there. I lived in Clear Lake, and one of the fraternity members lived on the lake, and he decided to have a party shortly before school was to begin. And I went to that and enjoyed it. And they said, you should go through Rush when you come to the university. And I went to Mason City Junior College for 2 years, and then came to the University of Iowa, and all the coursework transferred perfectly, so I could go into whatever I was interested in majoring in. And so I did go through Rush, and there was a fraternity that I was interested in, and I guess they were interested in me, but I'd also tried out for the Hawkeye Marching Band. And so I had a choice to make. And I decided, and it was the best decision probably I've made short of deciding to ask Jan to marry me. And that was that I was going to be a part of the marching band and then maybe be a part of the fraternity starting the next spring. Well, I'm certainly glad I did that because Iowa was invited to the 1959 Rose Bowl. And so I had a trip to the Rose Bowl, and we traveled by train, and we were sponsored by Santa Fe. That was just, again, what a wonderful experience. And if I hadn't made that decision, I probably would be still kicking myself. But anyway, we would like to try to provide some help to the band that is not sort of on the everyday kinds of things like maybe some types of equipment or supplies or that kind of thing. Something that would have some lasting benefit to it. and not only to the operation of the marching band, but also would benefit the members of the band. And there's a number of band members who are interested in majoring in music in one way or another. But there are many that are not. I know that the statistic on that, I'm not sure. But
The largest major of the Hawkeye Marching Band is music at about 20%. The second largest is engineering at about 13%. And from there on, we service nearly every major, every department, every degree program at the University of Iowa.
okay, were you able to hear that? Use the mic. I think that's a very interesting statistic.
It's a spectacular statistic. So again, about 20% of the Hawkeye Marching Band are music majors. That's the largest major in the band. About 13% are engineering majors, the second largest. And beyond that, we service nearly every major, every degree program, certainly every college and nearly every department at the University of Iowa. We have nursing majors and science majors and sociology and pre-med and law and science. We have everything. I mean, every major that you can think of has worn that uniform at one point or another, and that becomes a really important part of our being, that all these folks come together for a unified cause. And that happens basically nowhere else on the university except for this marching band.
And so that is what I was mentioning, sort of behind the hope that Jan and I have for being able to provide funding that's going to have sort of a lasting benefit to the university. And it's great to have somebody like Dr. Bush, who is interested in having the marching band certainly put on a great show 7 Saturdays a week, and hopefully a bowl game, a game after the season, but also to do things that would involve the community. And maybe, for example, having some activity from the marching band that could come over to Oakdale here and put on a program. I think that would be interesting. I want to thank the 3 here because you heard just very briefly the kinds of things that they're interested in, and certainly with the 3 of them and the work that they're doing as far as working with the university. And Dulcie now has graduated and has plans for the future. And it's just great, and I appreciate them coming this evening because school is on, and I'm sure they have responsibilities there too. And so that's just very briefly the kinds of things that we hope that Jan and I and with the help of Eric, working closely with him, of course, and with the Center for Advancement that also helps with planning matters and so on. So anyway, but very briefly, I noticed that my watch says right now it's 8 o'clock. And so I want to say that I don't want to keep you because we want it to be done by 8. But if there are any questions, can you stay for just a moment? And anybody that would like to leave certainly is free to do so. But anyway, thank you again for being here. Sir.
I'll run the mic around. You can
Go.
What's that?
Where do the contributions go?
Contributions go to helping students for the most part, so student engagement. So the question is, where does the money go, right? So helping our students in terms of being in the Hawkeye Marching Band, so their scholarships are involved, logistical things, so all the parts of moving the band from one place to another, new instruments, the replacement of instruments, the repairing of instruments, new technology, so things that we do like for flip folder app and having our drill and music on individual devices, helps out with that as well. Renovations to our field, our equipment, our facilities, all of those things are enhanced by that.
Tax deductible?
It is tax deductible for the donation. It's not the regular iClub donation, even though technically it's through athletics. It's not that, but it's a regular tax deductible donation that you would be able to write off, yes.
Checks to Lou?
Cash only, I think Lou is how he likes it. But, so what I'll do real quick, again, because I know some people are probably going to want to go, we'll keep doing questions, but I thought we might do here, this is going to be savvy, tech savvy here. So, If you are interested in giving, that QR code that you see over there, all you have to do is grab your phone and there's a little link will come up. It'll take you right to the page. I'll leave it up the rest of the evening, but that's a way to give to Lou and Jan's fund through that QR code. So other questions?
Yeah, I lived in married student housing barracks from 59 to 64. And we used to go to the game every weekend. And there's a couple of things that we used to look forward to that we haven't talked about here. One was the marching band, which at that time did not march in straight lines. They just kind of, all of a sudden, all ran into a big mess. And then all of a sudden, they were back out. And it was very impressive. The other thing is the Scottish Highlanders. We always look forward to seeing the Scottish Highlanders. This was at the time when the guys had all gone to the military, and so it was all women. And that was something we look forward to as well, those two things.
For those of us who can't get to the stadium, there are websites we could watch the bands, the show. Is that? Can you tell us what that is?
So a couple things. I'll go back to the first thing about the Highlanders. Everybody know the history of the Highlanders? So the Highlanders actually were the largest male bagpiping corps when they first started, and then when the men went to war and women joined the Hawkeye Marching Band, and they left the Hawkeye Marching Band when the men came back, that's when it converted over, so it became the largest female bagpiping corps in the world. And it lasted all the way up until the early 2000s, actually, so that's a great history part of our thing. So the question is about where can you see the Hawkeye Marching Band? So there are a number of different places. So we have some of our best shows up on our website, hawkeyemarchingband.uiowa.edu. That's one place you can look, but if you want to see what the band is doing week in and week out, follow us on social media. Facebook is the easiest way. So if you go to facebook.com or use it on your app, just search Hawkeye Marching Band. It'll pop right up for you. Make sure that you give us a follow. We live stream all of our shows, both our pregame and our halftime shows every single week. There are other videos. If you want to follow us when we travel, we always post videos of us traveling, photos. There's 300 photos right now of the Iowa Pep Band in Dallas playing for the Women's Final Four. There are going to be a lot more this week. But again, if you want to follow us that way, that's the easiest way to check out what we're doing is just follow us on Facebook. And then if you want to set an alert, you can follow us that way and program the app to give you an alert when there's ever a live stream. You can basically see us every time we perform. That's the best way.
That's the only way we can see.
Absolutely. Sure. And that's why that's one of the reasons that we do live stream that way. Some of them will go up on YouTube as well. Some of the ones that are the most long lasting, like the big shows like the Ohio State one as well. But you can see us live in that way every time, every Saturday if you look, if you tune into Facebook. Question?
Do the student members get any scholarship help, and are they reimbursed for like academic credit?
That's a really good question. So a couple things to that. The short answer is no. There are a couple of members of the band who are scholarship. One is the Golden Girl, and there's some other smaller scholarships that we're giving this year. The Truax family, Judd Neville and Truax, have given a scholarship that we give on a yearly basis. Kelly Enstrom's folks, Ken and Kathy Enstrom, have given a major scholarship in her name this year as well. So a couple smaller scholarships that exist and a couple larger ones as well. But on the whole, no. That's different from the past. Those of you who know the Hawkeye Marching Band used to actually get a yearly scholarship that covered the credit. That's something we're working on right now and hopefully getting enough money where we can start to scholarship all of the incoming members again. That's one of the big visions that I have. And again, that could be one of the things that this fund helps with in getting that funding. I'd love to be able to cover the credit for every person that wears the uniform. It's a great question. Other questions? Any questions for our wonderful panel up there as well? Sure. We'll get you a microphone. Who designs the outfits? Come here. This is a good one.
So I have a couple outfits. My coach mainly designs them, and he designs my competition ones too, which is unusual because my coach is a guy, and a lot of guy coaches don't usually do it, but he's pretty good at it. Kylene, which was the Golden Girl last year with me, so we had 2 last year, and then she had 4 years before that. She designed a lot of her own costumes, which is insane. I could never do that. So I have a couple of her old ones that she gave to me, so she designed some of them too. There's like baton costume, like sewers and all that. It's a really niche world, but yeah, so they do it.
And there have been times already where Kylene and Whitney before her and now Ella have actually helped design things, and she'll give me a rendering and she'll send me a couple pictures. What do you think of this, and how does this look, or how can we, merge these two ideas? And we've talked a little bit about that, and she'll give me sort of a mock-up that way. And then once we approve it, it gets made actually pretty quickly, and we get the new costume and all that. And they're always stunning. I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous every time. So she knows good people. It's a good question. Other questions? I'll come back to you.
I wondered if you had a pep band going to Dallas.
We certainly do. The Iowa Pep Band has 29 members that landed today, about half of which were also in Seattle for the Sweet 16. Dulce was on that trip in Seattle as well, so about half of the members are still there. The Iowa Pep Band is about 80%, actually a little bit less than that this year, almost closer to 70% Hawkeye Marching Band members and about 30% non-Hawkeye Marching Band members, so people that are part of the athletic band program and not necessarily the marching band. But there's 29 strong that have landed in Dallas, and they're going to be cheering on the women every step of the way. So you can follow that on Facebook as well. We'll have the performance, we'll have some photos up, and a lot of things that they're doing this week. So it's an exciting time to be a Hawkeye. Go Hawks indeed. Other questions for anyone, any of us?
Oh, it was probably in the 70s or 80s. Drumline had a real flash appearance. They all wore aviator sunglasses, and what happened to that? That was cool.
There's nothing cooler than the drumline, first of all. They do still wear aviators in some rehearsals and all that. They don't wear them on the field a whole lot anymore. But if you see them in the stands, they'll have some shades on. What's that? They wear them at the lot show. Yeah, if you catch them at the lot show, they're almost always in the sunglasses as well. So, and those aviators have a tradition in the HMB. If you go back, well, even the one photo that was in the slide presentation, the guy playing the bass drum had him on his head, right? So yeah, nothing's cooler than the drumline. Ellen knows. Here you go.
I have a financial question for you. On an annual basis, how much does it cost to run and operate and manage this puppy?
So the question is a good one. What does it cost to run the Hawkeye Marching Band? That is a really good question. So operationally, on a year-to-year basis, it's $170,000 to $180,000 to keep the lights on. When we travel to a place like Ohio State, it's $90,000 to $110,000, depending on what one trip. Yeah, that's going to be the hotel rooms, the buses, the food. It's all covered for the students. So in a year like that, we're talking about over $200,000 for that. It also costs money for the salaries as well. We employ 7 to 10 people on the staff, a media manager and John Amy. Our operations manager, Kathy Ford, also makes a stipend, for example, for doing extra things above and beyond her 9 to 5 type position, so that comes out of the Hawkeye Marching Band as well. We have a slew of volunteers that do lots of stuff for the marching band. Our work crew as well, the undergraduates have a salary that they make. So probably year in and year out, somewhere between $250,000 to $275,000 to run the HMB. I mean, it's a major, major undertaking from a financial standpoint. It really is. And that's to keep the lights on. Beyond that, to do things that are above and beyond and get new things for the band and add new traditions and new instruments and new, bells and whistles, of course, comes beyond that. It's a really good question. Yes, it really is. Yeah. But that's one of the reasons the supporters are so important to us, because without that, we would not be able to progress the band the way we have been. Other questions? Once, twice? Okay. Well, I want to thank these three wonderful individuals: Ellen McDaniel, Miss Major of America, our Golden Girl; Christian Frankel, our drum major; Dulce Flores, undergraduate staff member and local celebrity here at Oak Knoll as well; and of course the one and only Lou Crist, our Golden Voice. Thank him for everything he's done. So thank you very much for being here tonight.